Welcome everybody to week 964 of the ESTA weekly lockdown webinars. And we've actually pre-recorded this. It's actually Thursday night, but I feel it's a bit like the news quiz because on Radio 4, because they do the same thing, don't they, Phil? So I don't feel we're cheating too much, do you think?
No, and my blood pressure's far lower now than it would normally be, so it's great.
As is mine, absolutely. We're really pleased to be welcoming today Naomi Yandell, who is our regional officer for, I'm sorry, I've forgotten, Naomi, where are you regional officer for?
Cambridgeshire.
Cambridgeshire, brilliant. Wonderful to have you on board. Thank you very much for coming. And Kanneh-Mason, who I know through my connections with the Royal Academy of Music, but fantastic to have her join the ESTA Council as a trustee. So welcome, Kadi, to your first webinar with us.
Thank you.
First of all, perhaps we could start talking to Naomi about her position as regional officer for Cambridgeshire. Now, Naomi, tell us about the kind of events that you've organised in the past.
Well, over the past, I've organised events for teachers, so professional development events. The latest one with Sarah Upjohn, who came and talked to us about the playing body, which was very well supported. Because I think teachers really feel quite strongly that they need to upskill on things like the playing fitness and making sure that we don't use our bodies wrongly. And then I've organised a series of sort of events in conjunction with St Faith's schools. So we've got a large string orchestra together, sort of intermediate standard, maybe grade 2 to 5, led by Marianne Oliver, who does the YSE at the Academy, or near the Academy. I'm not quite sure how together it is, but she does that for Procordia. And so the last one we did was it was actually on the 8th of March, so we were already thinking about hand sanitizer and stuff. And that was probably the last time for a long time that we'll actually get people in a room together, so many children. So that was that's really what I've been doing, and since then I've just been trying to be there as part of the string teaching community. I've had a few people sort of worried about various things, and I've tried to be there and offer what advice I can, and actually point them to ESTA webinars and that kind of thing. So that's what I've up to.
Fantastic. Now, Phil, actually, we were talking, weren't we, a minute ago about teaching in person. When's it going to be allowed to happen? Do you have any updates for us on that at the moment?
Well, yeah, as explained last week, we've got a small sort of trustee working party looking at this very issue, because teachers are very keen to teach face-to-face, but it's got to be done safely. I mean, at the moment, things are so fast moving. I think we're going to release a series of bulletins, because I'm pretty sure things are going to change very, very frequently. I think we're probably going to focus. I've seen some of the drafts from this working party, and it should be released in a day or so. But one of the things I think they're going to focus on is getting ready for when the day comes that one can teach face-to-face. So as Naomi just mentioned, everything from sort of hand sanitizer to exactly, distancing and what masks and how people walk through the house, all of those kind of things. Can you teach in the garden? I think people will have to make their own individual risk assessments. In the end, the responsibility, if somebody's coming to your house, the responsibility lies with you as a teacher, to think these things through. So, but we'll give a little bit of guidance to that. So that's sort of ongoing, but many bulletins to follow, I suspect.
Thanks for keeping us updated there. That's great. Now, Kadi, I've taught 2 of your children, actually, which I'm very honoured to have done. I have to say, I love teaching them because they work so hard. They do everything I ask. It's amazing. And I'm convinced it's not just because they're great kids. I think there's a heavy hand, a very friendly, heavy hand somehow backstage. And I think that hand might be you. You've got to tell us, is it true? How much do you help them with their practice? I know I'm going slightly off piste here, but I've wanted to ask you seriously for years. How much do you get involved in their practice?
Well, of course, it varies on their age. So when they're younger, I help a lot. So for example, with Aminata, I did a lot more when she was younger, and I probably do less now than I did. With Brimer, of course, by the time he came to you, he was what, 16,
Yeah, about
17, that. Yes. And so I didn't have to do very much. And by then he was doing it all himself. But I think if you start when they're young and you put in principles that they need to practice, then after a while they just do it by themselves. So it's not really a heavy hand, it's an encouraging hand.
You see, I've tried this, you see, so with my eldest son, I'm thinking, yes, he just needs to understand that it's time to practice. But 11-year-old boy, like, I don't want to do my trumpet practice. So it must be, I wonder, is there a knock-on effect because the older ones did it well, that the others sort of, it never occurred to them to question it?
Yes, absolutely. I think because it's a family thing, it's a group thing, and it's not lonely. If everybody's doing it, you're not isolated in a room doing it by yourself. And I think that's very different.
Yeah. Do you have set times when everyone's practicing?
Everyone's practicing all the time, so there isn't really so there's I hope you can't hear it, but they're practicing string trios and string quartets right underneath me, and I'm aware that that's happening, but I'm so used to the noise. It was only when we started this webinar I suddenly thought, oh yes, there's lots of noise in the house. So people are practicing all the time. Yeah. So I don't need to make it into a special thing.
Yeah.
Eddie, do you play yourself? Do you play an instrument, or does Stuart as well?
We played at school age, so I played piano and clarinet, and Stuart played piano and cello. So, but of course we went on to do other things. So I suppose we're used to, from our childhood, that's what you do. So sure. It seemed natural to us, yes.
And so when you're, but the little ones, the younger ones, when you're starting them off, which is definitely the more labour-intensive time.
Yes.
When you say you encourage them, what exactly? Do you sort of say to them, this is how you structure your practice, we do this first, we do that first, blah, blah, blah? Or are you sort of letting them lead it a little bit? How have you approached it?
Well, I think a vital part of it is the teacher, because you come in and what they are doing is practicing for the teacher. So I will say, okay, Nicole says, this is what you need to do for her lesson. And they're really excited about that. Now, if I was the teacher, and the parent at the same time, I think that's very difficult, because you're coming and saying, you're doing this for me. It's not nearly as exciting. But if you're preparing something for Nicole, then that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So that works very well.
Yeah, my dad taught me, and he was on hiding to nothing really, because yeah, it was like, oh, it's him again, you know, poor guy, didn't stand a chance really. And I always felt very strongly that I didn't want to teach my children anything, because I felt it was an impossible situation to put yourself in, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Because then you're the encourager, you're the helper, but then you're also the person that everything's being prepared for. You can't be all those things at once. I found it too difficult.
Yeah.
So definitely.
And so at what age, on average, have your kids sort of shed you, as it were? Have they decided, you know, that, okay, it's time to, I'll just do it without it there?
Yes, I suppose it's by 12, 13, they do a lot on their own, but they never shed you, because they always want to, I suppose, perform things to you, and they want to show you what they've done. And we have family concerts usually, well, before lockdown, it was every Sunday afternoon, someone would have to prepare a work in progress, maybe 2 of them, 3 of them, maybe all of them, in the hallway to everybody, and get feedback. So that sense of you knowing what they're doing and being on top of it was really important. Yeah. You never just leave them on their own, because that's a bit discouraging.
Yeah, that's quite something to have that to work for every week. You wouldn't dare not practice, because you would lose face, wouldn't you?
And I think the hardest people to practice for, to perform to, are your own family.
Sure, definitely. I'm thinking about people,
definitely.
people who don't have 6 other siblings to play to. Yeah. I'm just wondering how we could all sort of help learn from that a bit. You know, I'm sort of imagining possibly getting together groups of friends, or people learning with the same teacher. I mean, the Suzuki method is brilliant, I think, mostly because it has your solo lesson, but it has the group lesson where everybody comes together, and it stops being a lonely practice on your own in a little room type situation, doesn't it?
Definitely. I do think the performance class idea is so important. And And I think there is a loneliness about the idea of going into a room, practicing on your own, and it's a bit like an echo chamber. You have to have that, this is me, and the fear of it, but also the joy and the praise and the encouragement. It has to be a conversation. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. So Naomi, your events that you help organise over in Cambridgeshire, I mean, there must be an element of that in there for your teachers as well as their students. That something to aim for, something to come together for. It must be a wonderful thing.
Yes, I also work for a string school called String Moves, which is run as a sort of a project by St John's College School in Cambridge, and we have 50 plus young string players coming every Saturday, and we've just done our online concert for which Celia and I wrote a piece called Sit via Zoom, because we were so incredibly worried that they were going to come back after all these online lessons with their hands kind of clamped onto their neck. So we did this piece that involved a lot of glissando. It was quite bluesy, and we had a backing track, and they all played together even though we were on Zoom. And I think just seeing each other's faces and seeing each other playing away, even though they were muted so that they could just hear themselves, it was just a fantastic and amazing kind of thing to do. So that was fun. Yeah,
I quite like that thing actually, where you're muted on Zoom. You're playing along with someone else, but you can really go for it because no one can hear you.
yeah.
A little bit like that moment in the King's Speech where he's stammering, and then Geoffrey Rush puts the headphones on him and gets him to shout it, and then he's free. I always think it's a bit like that, Zoom. Love to mute myself. It's great. Now, Naomi, you've also been busy publishing recently. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your publishing.
Yes, well, as some of you might know, that on the new Trinity string syllabus, there are pieces by Celia and I called, it's a sort of book for young beginner string players, all violin, viola, cello and double bass. And they're pieces that use left-hand pits, glissando, which we talked about, and various techniques that we think are really, really important in actually setting up a really good setup. And so we've been doing those, but we've also been working on a complete series of books preparing people for their sight reading for Trinity exams from initial to grade 8. And we're not just doing it for violinists, we're doing it for violas, cellos and double basses from initial to grade 8, which is quite exciting. And it's going to be available in the autumn. So I hope everyone looks out for that. And hopefully it'll prepare people in incremental steps towards their sight reading rather than suddenly rushing them into something very tricky.
So
Yeah.
Naomi, I've got to ask, how do you set about devising the material to stretch one's sight reading ability? What's the sort of format and plan behind that?
Well, the plan is the syllabus. So we take the syllabus, and for each grade, we know what the syllabus is asking for, and then we work back from that. So we then devise 10 different lessons focusing on a particular thing. And there are duets to play at the end of every lesson so that it adds a little bit of something fun. So to grade 5, they're all fun tunes within the duet that you wouldn't necessarily know was a tune, but when you play it, you'll realise it's, I don't know, Old MacDonald Had a Farm or something like that, and it'll come out at you. And then grade 6 to 8, we've taken bits of chamber music and that kind of thing and put them into duet form with the teacher, so that hopefully they're getting to know some themes as well as actually just preparing for their exam. So hopefully with our string tips on sight reading, it'll all just make sight reading just a little bit easier and less painful.
It's great though to approach it like that in increments, like you say, rather than having that last day exam panic, sort of the night before the exam. Oh, I better learn to sight read. I can't sight read. But it's only because you haven't been practicing it, isn't it? It's a muscle. I keep saying to my students, it's a muscle that has to be, you know, trained and taken to the gym, not just expected to suddenly be a bodybuilder overnight. So It
Yeah.
sounds like a really great thing. I can't wait to try those books out on my students. I've got a little announcement, a little bit of a push myself this week. We've recently this week launched the Friends International Violin Academy, which is an online course happening at the end of July, 30th of July till the 5th of August. And it's the most ridiculous lineup of teachers you've ever seen in your life. It's a very small number of students who have applied, who there are places for. And the teachers include, they are led by Rodney Friend, who used to be the leader of the London Philharmonic Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, and the BBC Symphony Orchestra. He's great mates with Itzhak Perlman and Pinchas Zuckerman, all sorts of people like that. He has an incredible knowledge of not just the orchestral repertoire, but also the chamber music repertoire and the solo repertoire. And he has pulled together his friends from all around the globe to take part in a music course for violinists. Now, you might think, I'm not going to play for Pinchas Zuckerman, and don't worry, you don't have to. But the great thing is that you can watch the masterclasses. So if you go along to friendsviolin.com, you can buy a ticket for the masterclasses, which are happening during that week, one every day. Absolutely stellar lineup of faculty there. So you'll get to watch these incredible people teaching the next generation of incredible people. So it'll be a real fly on the wall moment. So do come along and join us if you can for that.
I've bought tickets.
Have you?
Yes.
Which ones have you bought them for?
Bought them for me to see my friends.
Will we all be playing along with Zoom muted, maybe? Yes. Fantastic. Phil, is there anything else you'd like to say tonight? Anything for next week?
Next week, what have we got next week? I think over the next 2 weeks, in a fortnight's time, we've got Dan and Joe, luthiers to the stars. So you can send in all your questions about, you know, how do I nail on a bridge or whatever it is one has to do. And then and then next week, we've just not quite finalized it yet, because we'll welcome another regional officer from ESTA, but I think we're also going to have a little conversation about the decisions and the choices students have to make coming up when they've just left school, and should they take that year out, or should they go to college now? And we're going to speak to some people from the university and a conservatoire. That's what I'm trying to put together. I think that'll be an interesting
yes,
conversation.
very topical.
Yeah.
Yes. Kadi, you've got one of yours is going. Who's going where next year?
Jennifer's going to the Royal College. And of course, the other 4 all went to the Royal Academy. So it'll be our 5th one at Conservatoire, so no university yet.
Yeah,
So
it's a difficult decision, isn't it?
It is.
Whether to take that gap year. But I mean, a gap year also can be a wonderful thing. It can be a dangerous thing. You know, to go off the boil in that year.
Yes.
So difficult. And yet, of course, such a difficult time to start any new institution, right? Yes. Interesting times. Anyway, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Lovely to have you join us. Thank you very much. Best wishes to everybody out there. Do send us in any questions for next week, and we'd love to hear actually if you have any students who are going to be applying, going to be going away in September, or even applying to audition this autumn for next September. So let us know how that stands. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.